Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the last track for sort of the last track of our four very exciting sessions that we have had. Just a second, sorry, I think it seems. Hi, sorry about that. So welcome to the final session of four very exciting series of talks that we have had starting Tuesday right now to Friday. A lot of you guys are coming on as from the previous session, so I'm sure you know the drill by now. However, for those that are new to the project, I'd like to take this opportunity to take you all through what is the project about? Why are we doing these sessions? Why have we called all these amazing people here to exchange ideas and share ideas with us? We actually represent an organization called Sensing Local and a community group called Malleswaram Social. Together, we are Malleswaram Urban Living Lab. We are a neighborhood level living lab that was set up almost a year back as an experiment to see how we can, we as technical people, as architects, urban planners, designers, that is Sensing Local, and Malleswaram Social as a group of active residents can come together to improve a neighborhood. This particular project that we have sort of taken on is called Walkable Malaysia. It has been funded under DULT's Sustainable Urban Mobility Accord. It's a one-year project to assess and test pilot solutions to see how to make the neighborhood walkable and pedestrian friendly. The project started in January this year. It is going to be on till December. And we are currently in the third month where we have completed some amount of our site work, field work, and are moving into our design workshop. The design workshop has been open to architects, urban designers, urban planners, designers as well, who are based out of Bangalore, most of them based out of Malleswaram. This particular series of session comes at a very timely time before we start actually looking at design, right? So we have looked at this series to help inspire, help us learn, and help us exchange even certain challenges that we face, not only in Bangalore, but in other cities, and as well understand how do we actually read the Indian city, which in fact we know very little about, right? And we always sort of take examples from the West or the East, whichever that may be, but rather than looking at examples from within our context, which very seldom come forward. So the four series that you see that have happened over the last 3-4 days actually came up to the aspect of saying what all do we want to understand when it comes to looking at Malleswaram's footpaths, roads, and public space design. So the Decoding Malleswaram Conservancies actually introduced us to these conservancy lanes, sort of ran us through what exactly is the potential and opportunity that we have here that we're completely missing and we would like to really revive. The second session focused on planning for public spaces and social life. Here as well, the focus actually moved into understanding planning processes and how do you set these design principles and who do you include into the design process. The third session that happened, which is Designing Streets for People yesterday, was it had the famous Tendershore Road. So it had Jana USP actually talk about how did Tendershore roads actually evolve, what were the principles that they were looking at when they looked at design of Tendershore roads, and how do you scale something like that up. Studio Pod really focused on This is Bombay focused as well as Delhi, where they really focused on understanding urban design and public spaces and the design of public spaces and how it has to be user driven and how their designs responded to that. So we very interestingly also got to understand the aspects that they consider important while designing for public spaces, which are highly applicable across the board. Today's session is a very interesting session. It's on tactical urbanism, a window to the future. Tactical urbanism is now becoming a known word, not new to the world, but fairly new to India. And we have Vidya and Abhimanyu who are joining us, who've done some amazing projects and are in the process and have, in fact, quite extensively sort of implemented something, learned out of it. And so for us, this session is probably the most exciting session out of the lot, because we really see how do you start testing interventions, how do people respond, and sort of quite excited to know how people, where they have done these interventions, how have they perceived it, including the government bodies and officials. So this session is largely focused on that. I'm going to take this opportunity to take you guys through a little bit over the next 2-3 minutes on Walkable Malleswaram as a project. So it sets a context to the discussion. Malleswaram, like most of you guys may know, is a 15-minute neighborhood. Everything you get within this neighborhood, whether it is work, play, whether it is schools, you want hospitals, name it, you have it within a 15-minute walking distance. However, what we realized is, even though this existed, a lot of the trips were happening by walk, and you did have a huge elderly population. Most of the footpaths were not in place, extremely congested, unsafe. A lot of people actually, in their own memory, know other people or people from their own families that have had accidents or fallen, or some sort of extremely hazardous issues that have come across this entire network. And this was sort of an exercise that we did whilst making the proposal itself and pitching it for the SUMA grant, where we pulled out data and understanding of what is people's experience of actually traversing these lanes. However, we realized that there were temperature roads that were coming about that intend to improve the footpaths on certain key roads. We do have the conservancy lanes that also exist. So the whole potential was to say that how could I now utilize this and reclaim a walking network for the neighborhood. From there came the vision saying that we want to create well-designed slow ways that leverage existing conservancy lanes, prioritizing the movement of pedestrians, especially elderly, children, and disabled, along this 15-minute neighborhood. And so this was the proposal that was pitched. It included 8 kilometers of roads with footpaths and 3 kilometers of conservancy lanes across the network. We do have an active website where we are going to be and are currently posting live updates as we have sessions. So even some of these sessions are coming online as well, along with all the other work that we've done. We've already conducted a walking audit with around 60 plus citizens, architecture students, other interested people from other neighborhoods apart from Malleswaram, who have participated and helped us audit 40 kilometers of footpaths and conservancy lanes, and actually identifying multiple barriers. This was done both at the daytime non-peak hour as well as an evening time to understand the dangers and the lit, unlit, and safe, unsafe zones as well. Our project partners are, first the government side, we have DULT and KNMTA and BBMP. Community partners are Malleswaram Social and Malleswaram Swabhimana Initiative. Malleswaram Urban Living Lab and Sensing Local are technical partners, and our campaign partners at the moment are Bengaluru Moving and YLab. So I'll stop right there, and I will welcome Vidya to the floor. Vidya's been a colleague. We worked together as well, and I'm really glad to have her here today. In fact, I think we keep discussing where things like we started in terms of pushing participative planning, participative design, and suddenly now it's all coming to the forefront together, where the government is also saying, yes, let's try this out. And I think Vidya has spearheaded that for India to a huge extent. There's a manual on tactical urbanism, which she has co-authored as well. So really great to have you here, Vidya. And over to you. You're on mute.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sylvia, for that glorious introduction. I'm equally happy to be here. As I keep telling you, it's a lot of mutual admiration for the work that Sensing Local has been doing as well. It's really nice to see former colleagues, sort of do pioneering work in their own cities. And I think it's a great time to be urban designers. And people who are working, like people who are working on cities. It's actually a great time to be in this line of work. And I think as Sophia mentioned, it's extremely heartening to see governments, pushing the mandate on participatory planning. Like this is actually our 10th year. This is Urban Design Collective's 10th year, and it's like nice to see that participatory planning is not an unknown terminology anymore, and that it's kind of like it's become like what sustainability was 10 years ago. Everyone used to use the S word, now they're all using the P word. So I think it's a good place to be in. But I I'll get straight to the talk now. I just so we're talking about tactical urbanism, which is one of the sort of approaches that involves multiple stakeholders, and we've had a good run with doing several of these projects past 2 years. Our first project, of course, was in 2019 November, when we worked with the Coimbatore Municipal Corporation to do a tactical urbanism exercise in the context of creation of NMT infrastructure, which is basically creating streets that are favorable for pedestrians. I'm gonna share this little sort of quick video with you guys, and then we'll. Right. Before my presentation, I just wanted to quickly run this.
We come almost every day here because I'm an NGO. I'm working with the Coimbatore Corporation, so almost every day I'm coming here, and every day I'm facing the issue. தினம் சரியும் ஒரு சின்ன சின்ன விபத்துகளும் சின்ன சின்ன பிரச்சனைகளும் நிறைய நடக்குது. இதனாலேயே எங்களுக்கு ரொம்ப crowd கம்மியாயிடுச்சு. என்னன்னா if you want to address all those issues like what you're saying, parking and everything, it would be a great first place to start.
You're all still here, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
very
I'm
much.
just gonna, yeah, sorry, that was one. I'm just gonna show you a second one, and then we can.
Sure.
We have developed a dedicated cycle track in Kochi city, start from Queen Muslim to DH Road. സിറ്റിയിലെ നല്ല ഇക്കണോമിക് ഗ്രോത്തിന് വേണ്ടി ആവശ്യമുള്ളത് നല്ല ഒരു ട്രാൻസ്പോർട്ടുമാണ്. ഇപ്പോൾ ട്രാൻസ്പോർട്ട് ഫെസിലിറ്റി, ഹെൽത്തി മൊബിലിറ്റി, ഗ്രീൻ മൊബിലിറ്റി ഏതെങ്കിലും സിറ്റിയിൽ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ദാറ്റ് ആക്ച്വലി എൻഹാൻസസ് ദ വാല്യൂ ഓഫ് ദ സിറ്റി, ദ ലിവബിലിറ്റി ഓഫ് ദ സിറ്റി. സോ ഇവിടെ നമ്മുടെ കൊച്ചിയിലെ ഇപ്പോൾ നല്ല ഒരു സന്ദേശമാണ് കൊച്ചിക്കാർക്ക്. We should have more non-motorized transport. We wish that Kochi becomes one of the healthy, livable cities and among the best cities in the world.
Okay, so is my screen visible now?
Not yet. Yeah, it's coming on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So those were two projects that we did. The first one was in Coimbatore. This was in November 2019, and the second one was in Kochi, which was recently done in January 2021. Second one, of course, was part of the Cycles for Change challenge that was hosted by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So I understand we have some residents, we have some students, and this is sort of meant to be an introductory session into what tactile urbanism is and what is involved in sort of conceptualizing and executing a project of this nature. So that's kind of what I will be going through in my presentation. So what is it? It's basically city or citizen-led quick, it's led initiative. It's quick and affordable. It's a way to test and demonstrate change in our physical environments. And it is premised on using short-term, low-cost and scalable interventions as a way to catalyze long-term change. And I'll come to this as we're sort of looking at the examples that I will be going through. So in the words of Jan Sadiq Khan, she says tactile urbanism shows how with a little imagination and resources at hand, cities can unlock the full potential of their streets. And it has several benefits. So it basically deepens our understanding of users' needs because it is premeditated by studies that look at really quick, rapid assessment of the urban environment in terms of what are the issues and the challenges and the various stakeholder groups that are involved, the various user groups that are on the streets, and what could be missing in a manner of enhancing their experience on the streets. It also serves as a proof of concept for projects that city is looking to take up, instead of going ahead and implementing a project, especially in the case of, say, for instance, cycle tracks, which can tend to become defunct very easily if there's not enough patronage. It gives you an opportunity to sort of do a trial run and see if there is enough mileage for a project like this, and if it requires any kind of course correction. So it really helps in terms of managing financial investments, as well as in terms of expediting project implementation. Because there is a clear go ahead if there is a positive feedback for the project that was put on the ground. It helps to quickly address problems. It's a way to sort of quickly test out certain solutions and see what's working, what's not working. Post implementation feedback also helps you understand what is whether what you have designed has been received well by the users or not. Cumulatively at the end of it, it also widens public engagement because it involves so many different people in the execution of this. There's cooperation that's required even for the temporary interventions that are put forth. So there is a sort of atmosphere conducive for working together that can be fostered through a tactical urbanism project as well. Essentially, this is what it is. It's short-term action that catalyzes long-term change. And it sort of runs through this entire cycle of empathizing, understanding what is the actual on-ground situation, defining it clearly, ideation, prototyping, testing, and then going back. The cycle has to repeat itself, and you can't do this with a permanent intervention. So I like how the topic itself for today's talk is titled as a window into the future, and I think we should really use this as a way to see if what we like, what we see through the window is what we like. So what are the possibilities in a tactical urbanism project? So you can connect places and people, and this can be done by extending sidewalks, by installing pop-up bike lanes, and so on. So connecting, getting a sense of where people are moving, what people are moving between, and establishing those linkages, especially when they are missing. It offers a great opportunity to do that. It also has potential to reduce conflict between mobility and livability. This can be done by streamlining carriageways, fixing intersections, installing pedestrian crossings, putting up traffic calming measures, and also reorganizing parking. And the best part is, just by doing it temporarily, it kind of seems palatable for the audience, because whether it's a city or the residents or the commercial establishments, everything becomes like a little palatable, once you tell them that it's like temporary and it's a testing ground, and then of course if they like it, it becomes permanent, or it goes into a round of reiteration in terms of design. The third potential is for it to improve access to public transport. If you look at improvements to bus stops, if you look at clearly defining bus lanes, bus bay markings, and so on. It also gives you an opportunity to improve livability on your streets. There's opportunities for placemaking if you want to do shade structures, especially in climates like ours. Seating, constantly comes up in user surveys as something that is missing in our streets, and especially when there's long waits for bus stops, for buses or other, sort of activities that they may be engaging with on the street. There's also a possibility to activate, zones in the street itself. There's nothing that stops us from thinking of streets as places that can give us joy. It offers the potential to include certain fun activities, especially in places where there is an increased volume of younger people that become primary user groups on the street. Lighting, where places where in pockets which have less lighting. Again, these could sort of even enhance safety and security. We haven't had an opportunity to try this in any of our projects, but I do believe it has potential to improve safety and security in places which do not have adequate lighting. And of course, there's art in the street, and I'm not going to overly justify this. I think it's quite necessary. The fifth potential is that it gives us a chance to look at wayfinding to improve legibility of our cities, connecting, again, sort of looking at an extension of connecting people to places, signboards, floor signage, trail markings. A lot of times we see that there's not enough signage in our streets, not enough information in our bus stops, not enough information for tourists who are like, sort of first-time visitors to our cities. And these are quick fixes that allow, to improve legibility on our streets. So moving on to, who's required for a project like this, right? Like, so there are what we define as like these 5 stages. The first part is the initiation and the championing. The second part is the coordination and logistics. And then we have the design and construction. And then we look into communications and documentation. And then, of course, there's the fundraising part for even executing a project of this nature. So broadly, these are the 5 key roles that are required for a project of this nature. Anyone can do this. Now, I know that this. The project, the Walkable Malaysia project, is centered around residents, and I think that's fantastic. But I feel horrible that in the initiation and championing part we haven't listed out RWAs, but there's nothing that stops them from being the people that are initiating and championing this. It's just that in our case, in both the projects that we have executed so far, it has been the city championing it, and as a way to reach out to the residents and the user groups. So there's 2 angles to it. I just want to clarify that. And a lot of places around the world, actually, residents seem to be championing this. It's not come to that stage yet in our cities, but I don't see why that cannot change, especially in the case of your project. But generally, there's a requirement for coordination across all of these departments, particularly the traffic police, because they need to be on board with the changes that are being made on the streets. And if there's any other agencies like the municipal authorities who may be involved with parking management and so on, like there may be a need to engage those from an administrative point of view. But of course, there's a lot of bottom-up work that is required as well, like a lot of scope for NGOs, RWAs, volunteer groups, student groups, academic institutions, who can all be part of this. Moving on to the 4 key stages. The first stage, of course, is what we call site selection. Then we look at site context appraisal, and then design and preparation for implementation, and of course, the implementation and post-implementation evaluation. So I'll quickly do a run through of what is required for these. So when looking to pick a site for implementing a urbanism project, we recommend that it's useful to think of loops so that you have a full sort of connectivity, a loop that connects several magnets in a way that increases the amount of footfall, and therefore in simple ways increasing the beneficiaries of such a project, so that the impact can be felt by many more people as opposed to a small segment that may have been done in one place and does not attract as much of a footfall on it. And then, of course, to connect places that people actually are visiting, like so looking at termini points and seeing if you can sort of link, have your loop around a termini point, or if it's not possible to have a loop, at least have a very clear A to B, which attracts a lot of people. The third criteria we recommend is to look at mixed-use streets, because it helps you sort of engage with diverse user groups, and enriches the both the site study as well as the design and conceptualization part of the project itself. And more user groups also means more opinions, and sort of I think it really enhances the ideation process of it itself. Look for public buildings. Usually nice to have public buildings on the stretch, because there's a sort of mix of agencies, like you have public as well as private, and the benefits can be felt by both, and in some ways it encourages both of them to think of the street as a common shared resource, despite ownership being varied. Bringing children into the equation would be nice because, again, it opens up the possibility to consider their needs in the designing itself. Six is very important. Always look to fix the intersection. Street will always have an intersection at two ends of it, and it's pointless to sort of look at an intervention that is limited to the strip segment, and when you're at the intersection, there is no sort of resolution. Follow the pedestrians. Like, you just basically look for streets which have high volume of pedestrians. Again, more the challenge, more fun is the ideation. And accommodate public transport. Again, just checking some boxes on diverse user groups. We spoke about legibility. We spoke about people that are, ephemerally experiencing the street as well. So accommodating public transport also sort of like helps you demonstrate how the reconfigured right-of-way that you may be doing as part of your design has multiple possibilities as well for others to see. Lastly, look for a variety in land uses. Like, so it sort of really opens up possibilities for looking at several design interventions. So once you've picked the site, the next stage is to look at the site context itself and do a very thorough appraisal. What we recommend here is, of course, mapping the entire site, looking at physical form attributes, doing the traffic study, which involves pedestrian and vehicular counts, look for tree cover, look for various activities, look for sociocultural aspects that even if they're temporal, it's fine, but make sure that they're being accommodated. Look for an age and gender mapping, see who are your, is the street encouraging all ages and all genders on it or not, and if that could be a cue for design. Look for socioeconomic activity mapping, see if there's vendors, see if you can accommodate vendors, or if they're, if there's possibility for being inclusive in that aspect as well. Majorly, focus on the user group mapping and analysis of, how they're using the space temporally as well, like on a 24-hour cycle, which are the user groups, which user groups are inhabiting that particular site or street, and what, and how they are engaging with it. So this is what we call the site context appraisal. And following all of this, you get into the design and preparation for implementation. It's of course recommended that the design responses adhere to the existing standards, either IRC guides or UTPEC or any other sort of local bylaws that may be applicable. So collate the inferences from stage 2, look at design interventions based on user needs assessments and site context assessments as well. If you're looking at it from a designer perspective, preparation of conceptual designs, and of course, most importantly, seeking approval from relevant government agencies. I mentioned the importance of cooperation and coordination with various agencies in the beginning. So ensuring that all the, sort of 5 key roles that were highlighted earlier, everyone's on board with what's going to unfold on the street. And then there's preparation of detailed designs and cost estimates for what has been approved. Stage 4 is, of course, the implementation and post-implementation. So it's very important to have a detailed work plan, because these are quick projects. You can't, sort of extend the timeline for what is happening, unfolding on site. Both of our projects were finished over a span of about 5 nights. And of course, yeah, bear in mind that a lot of this work happens through the night, because you're making changes and it's not possible to sort of like work through that during the day. So a very clear work plan is required, ensuring all of the labor is in place, ensuring all of the materials are procured and in place. Traffic rerouting plans are important. You need to work with the traffic police to see what kind of traffic deviations are required during implementation. And one other thing is, of course, safety of people that are working on the site itself, like ensure that there are adequate safety measures for people who are working at site, implementing the designs. So this is the implementation part, and then once that's done, it's important to have an engagement strategy for evaluating the designs. Like and that's up to how you want to design it. Like it could be user perception surveys, follow-up surveys to surveys that were done in the site context appraisal stage, or any other sort of creative ways of collecting responses. To be through radio interviews or whatever. But it's important to sort of get plan that as well in advance, because you don't want to miss out on the opportunity of finding out if what you did worked. It kind of defeats the whole purpose of it. So this is just an introduction to the sort of what, how, and why, and everything. Just going to quickly run you through the two projects that I presented. This is the Coimbatore example. So we had this, which was the existing geometry. Our configuration included, there was a sidewalk, there was a bus lane, and then there was motor vehicle lanes, there was parking on one side, and then there was sidewalk. What we did was not really alter anything. The configuration remained the same. What we did was actually redistribute the space, because in this case, as we saw, there was no need for any addition, but it really was an unequal distribution of space between these various user groups. And therefore, that space was just realigned and reallocated, keeping in mind the counts that we had taken. So we had taken pedestrian vehicle counts, and we also mapped out the parking requirements, and basically streamlined it for an equitable distribution of the existing right-of-way. So this is what it's like. And then we also identified that there was a complete lack of safe crossings, and there was a significant volume of both school children as well as senior citizens who had, there was a lot of crossings that were required, and a lot of crossings that were happening along the stretch, but nothing as sort of was a designated crossing. And in order to also, in some ways influence the behavior of pedestrians who cross streets. I mean, there's a huge tendency to just cross wherever we want to, right? And I'm sure all of you will agree to that. We looked at making these playful three-dimensional crossings as well, as a way to encourage people to use pedestrian crossings. So it's like something colorful, and you're tempted to want to walk on it. Small ways to induce change in behavior as well for pedestrians. And then we looked at the intersections, because the intersections are a lot of conflict between pedestrians, motorists, and this needed to be streamlined. What we did was to sort of take the intersections, tighten them, reduce the turning radii, and of course introduce the street crossings so that there was a regulation of how vehicles would move. And this was interesting because we also got to test if this was working, and it was one of the best things to see that the vehicles did not step into any of the painted zones, and which kind of proved the point that is the turning radius that was required, and that there was an unnecessary provision of asphalt for the carriageway, which could have easily been reclaimed for pedestrians to cross the road safely, for them to have enough waiting areas as they cross, and so on. So this is the design intersection. This is what it was when it was implemented, and this is the lead up to that intersection. And this was another intersection at the other end, and this is what it looked like, and this was our proposal, and this is what it looked like after we implemented it.
Vidya, can I just request you to wrap up in next 2 minutes, if possible?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
Okay, and we also noticed another thing, and this came up quite a lot in our user surveys, is that there was a complete lack of shade in our in this particular street, and it was also oriented in the east-west direction, which meant that none of the buildings also provided any shading, and there were trees only on one side, and therefore the other side was permanently exposed throughout the day. So we looked at a provision of shading structures. This is what it looked like when it was implemented. And also we introduced other activities to encourage people to linger on the street. As I mentioned, there's no reason why streets can't be places that provide some joy. Especially that we noticed there were about 8 schools in the vicinity, and all of them come to the street to board buses to go back home. So we introduced a bunch of games on the sidewalks so kids could be engaged as they're waiting for buses. This looks like, and of course the other aspect that kept getting highlighted in our user surveys was the lack of seating. So we introduced these elements, provided additional seating. And lastly, we also kind of looked at the utilities part. There's these, I'm sure you all noticed these ugly boxes, and we looked at activating those as well. That's this is the second project, but I think I will not get into this. We're going to wrap up, so I think I'll close with this. I'll take questions, and if there's anything I can sort of like.
Sure, we'll do the questions, I think, post Abhimanyu's session.
Yeah, sure.
And then we'll just open out for common questions.
Sure.
Abhimanyu, over to you. I think Abhimanyu is also covering cycle lanes. So the Cycle for Change challenge that he was part of in Delhi. And I think we'll cover some parts of it. So it'd be great to see that as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for the presentation, Vidya. I think there's also like a lot of things to learn for even myself, and that sort of structuring actually like helps just think about tactical urbanism in a very like structured way. And I liked how you listed out all the processes and such. What I'm going to be, I'm also going to just share my screen.
Yeah, we can see it. You just need to make it full screen. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, just let me also switch to the presenter mode. Okay, is this visible?
No, I don't see the entire screen. So we're
you don't. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I think if you just make it full screen, I think it should be. Yeah, this is good.
Cool, that works. Okay, so another word for like, I think I liked how Vidya touched upon the design thinking process and how that's very similar to what we're trying to do for cities. And therefore, like I tried to come up with another word for it, which is quite popularly used as well, which is urban prototyping for shared futures. And just the way that I'm going to structure this presentation, I'm going to try and cut it short. And the way that I'm going to structure it is like Sobia mentioned, I'm going to share the project that we did with NDMC last year, which was around cycles for change. And towards the end of it, come to some points about tactical urbanism that we felt were useful to ponder over. Just a little bit about ourselves. I am Abhimanyu. I represent Architecture for Dialogue. We abbreviate it as AFD. And what we're trying to do is, we're a collective of young architects, really young organization. We're working for people in the environment. That's me, that's Dipanshu, there's 2 of us. And I think this is also a good point to say that we are no experts on tactical urbanism or urbanism in that sense. And therefore, like, this is more so like just the project that we did and some learnings for it. While we're not experts, we are all obviously curious about cities and urban systems, relationships with people, habitats, relationship with people, and also, as you guessed it, streets. And we're firm believers in this test, learn, scale approach. I agree with that. This has to be cyclic, not as linear as it is shown here, but and when Smart Cities mission prescribed this sort of approach for cities to follow in cycles for change, we felt that this was a good match and we would want to engage with it. So we took this question to NDMC, like because of COVID, there was a rise in cycling all over, including Delhi. And was Delhi preparing for it? Was Delhi preparing to scale up the cycle infrastructure or initiate cycle infrastructure? and be somewhere by in say 10 years. So over the course of 3 months, we did a project with them where we selected 6 kilometers of a pilot route, ran the demonstration, or as you could say, the pilot, for 9 days to be able to engage with people and learn for further phases. So it was a mixture of both designing interventions across intersections, lanes, and as well public engagement activities. But and that is to say the question, what is the right kind of cycle infrastructure for Delhi? Because as Sobia mentioned, this thing is like same as tactical urbanism. I think NMT infrastructure, and at least like the contemporary NMT infrastructure, is new to Indian cities, and we don't have enough case examples. So where do we start? And we started with like some initial research, what makes a city cycle friendly, ended up on these 3 pillars: safety, convenience, but also experience, because you have to get people out of their cars, and just mere provision of infrastructure isn't going to cut it. To be able to make a transition to NMT sooner or quicken it, I think we feel that delightful experiences and have a role to play there. And that's how we map these interventions, like all the possible interventions that are possible, like you see chicanes, and if you could say traffic calming, things like pop-up cycle lanes, bicycle parking, and all of those possible interventions we mapped to this framework to be able to select a few and test a few. So that sort of, I think the learning here being like, this framework helped us prioritize what to do and what not, because resources are limited, time's limited. And the pilot that we are talking about is, like Vidya mentioned, connecting spaces that have a good active footfall. So that was India Gate for us. New Delhi, in that sense, is an interesting region because it's got so good parks like the Lodi Garden and ultimately Lodhia district. So we mapped out a route which is about 5-6 kilometers and tried to connect it. And it had a variety of neighborhood streets as well as high traffic streets, a track through the Lodi Gardens, which was interesting to bake into the track, and also neighborhood streets. Where Lodi Colony, in that sense, I felt the neighbor, which is the neighborhood that we were intervening in, is very similar to Malleswaram in the sense that it's sort of based on a grade. It has like, it's already got some, like it's a walkable neighborhood with a lot of schools and such, and you guys might find some parallels that are useful there. Just jumping into lanes and intersections, I won't really go into technical details of drawings, but the point being that there are many guidelines to refer to, both like the ones that are prescribed in India sort of by Indian Roads Congress, but also like all of these other global guidelines. And that is to say that we were trying to make sense of what designs to follow, because there isn't like one right thing to do when you're piloting infrastructure and really figuring out where to go from here. And so we came up with some, from all of the reading and research a little bit and stakeholder consultation, primarily with NDMC. What we did was figure out, okay, this is what we wanted to try and design and implement, both a combination of shared streets as well as dedicated streets. We had a roundabout there, which was an interesting piece to combat. And we tried to reclaim the periphery of the road there to be able to say that we could, test out a cycle track there. And this is sort of what the initial idea looked like. This is how eventually it looked like. And similarly, there were junctions. We tried, like, there was a 4-way junction, which was quite like, we didn't imagine that it would be difficult to design for, but we tried bicycle boxes. We tried going the Dutch way, in almost following like a roundabout kind of approach. This was an unsignaled junction with very low traffic. But ultimately, we and NDMC, we went for the safest route, and which was basically to just like facilitate left turns. And what that kind of brings me to is that there's a lot of design negotiation that needs to happen. Infrastructures like these, city governments are also figuring out what is like a safe extent to implement, how much can we reclaim road space, and such and such. So there's a constant design negotiation that happens, and tactical urbanism in that sense is a good tool to be able to facilitate conversations or make progress in terms of city infrastructure. We also did some placemaking. We created a pop-up cycle plaza. Because we wanted to address experience, we created a recreational space for cyclists, and we did this by introducing ramps and obstacle courses in this stretch of a street. This is Lodi Colony, and from the many internal roads, we blocked one of them for 9 days, blocked vehicular traffic, and
actually nothing because this is the first.
Sorry. Yeah.
It's okay. I'll continue. So this is Lodi Colony. This is the plaza that we made, and we introduced we blocked vehicular traffic, and for 9 days we let the neighborhood people and cyclists kind of make use of it, reclaim it, and have fun. These were the two elements. I don't think I need to go very much into this, but this is sort of what it looked like. And it saw interesting participation from all age groups, which was just very encouraging. This is the art intervention. We did the art interventions with the Start India Foundation. This is sort of the intervention that we did in Lodi Garden just to popularize the track and such. I'm just going to skip through these images. And ultimately, all of this demonstration, all of this pilot allowed us to engage with people and gather feedback. These are just some images of people using the tracks. Just going to skip through. This is the Cycle Plaza. And we did that by facilitating guided tours, both in mornings and evenings, which required traffic marshals, and NDMC mostly led this effort. We also, in terms of engaging with people, we planned certain activities. One very rudimentarily, asking for feedback on a printed map, which was to say both good things and bad things about the track as they felt. Also some more nuanced discussions with cyclists on how might Delhi be cycle ready. And this was both with individuals as well as groups of cyclists, which was good. And also just not to exclude motorists. So because there was an ample, what this placemaking thing does is it collects a lot of people together, and therefore it forms a good opportunity to really make them into a group, do an activity. And what we did with them was an activity called What's Your Commute, where we asked people what were the considerations when they choose a mode of transport, whether it's a car or a cycle or just walking. So that was good. And ultimately, I think all of these project components come down to, I think, why tactical urbanism is a thing that we've still discussed quite a lot. But I just wanted to point out that there's a lot of times infrastructure in the city isn't, I mean, it may have a broken design, but sometimes it's, especially in NDMC, we saw that the infrastructure often was pick and span, and therefore, even if it did not share streets equally and such, and therefore, tactical urbanism is a good way to be able to test designs without altering infrastructure, and which is a lot of the, I think most of the interventions that we did were exclusive of any civil work done, besides some thermoplastic the work, and which was nice because it was quick, but it was also low cost, as well as it did not really hamper the existing infrastructure to a lot more extent. So that sort of low commitment makes it easy for city authorities to just engage in the process. And besides what we did, there are many other ways to get to do these projects. I think there are many ways to test out cycle lanes, many ways to test out cycle symbols, also parking, and therefore there's a lot of things that we did, but also a lot of things that we didn't end up doing. And like I was talking about earlier, a lot of successful examples that we see emerge in Indian cities have a lot of design negotiation backing them up. And that design negotiation is between design agencies, also city governments, also the users. And that sort of negotiation of design and approach, I think, is easier to do when you can demonstrate an intervention, because it makes trade-offs clearer. It just makes the engagement that you have then with public is beyond perception and just wishful thinking, and more so towards, okay, this is what it is looking like, does it work or not? And to that point, I think prototyping, demonstration, engagement, learning, iteration is an important thing to follow, and and can be followed in many ways. Also, like again, like I said, I don't think we used tactical urbanism to the fullest. You could also, like in case of identical junctions and lane types, you can do A by B testing of interventions, which is to say, you test one design at one place, and at the other intersection you test out the other design to be able to compare and see. And that this sort of things happens a lot with software and product development. But I think it will be nice to see cities doing that. Also, this this is our image from. I just wanted to show this to you, to the group, that this is the roundabout that we made. But like even though there was a design process along with it, even though a lot of people were opting for the cycle track, a lot of them weren't. And you would see here there are bollards which NDMC opted for in place of safety cones. And what that does is that it just limits design to be open to modification. And that's a constant. Again, besides design typologies and such, it is important to also negotiate that between temporality and permanence. And a lot of times, while the city governments are very accustomed to just implementing infrastructure in a permanent sort of way, just taking for granted that these design typologies that are existing in standards will work. And I think that's something that again requires a lot of conversation. Why tactical urbanism? Also, starting small is a lot of times failing small, which is great. But again, the hard part being that you have to convince the client or the city authority or whoever you're working with, the partners, to do the same, to fail small. And that is something that is a concept that sometimes it's hard to digest. But we have to all be, again, like I said, we have to be open to learning, open to modification, and like failing faster, failing smaller, which is the basis for prototyping and design thinking. I think that it has to start being applied in cities. And these small infrastructural changes nudge bigger behavioral changes, and that's exactly what we are, interested in our group. And I think, like us all as a group here today, I like the thing that drives us, and working in cities and in streets, is like a singular traffic cone on a sidewalk would change behavior in very curious ways. And that's the interest that we have in streets. And we feel that that's very that those sort of small changes have a ripple effect that we should all be looking out for. And I'll end the presentation here and open for discussion.
Great. I'm so glad you showed that last image. We have, in fact, we are doing a cycle-friendly project in Gagnakundi. Some of them are here as well. Again, looking at tactical urbanism. And one of through the user interviews, especially utilitarian cyclists, with or without a cycle lane, they will still cycle. So whether they will follow what you are putting as a middle class, upper middle class requirement is still in question, right? And so we are also trying to sort of play with that and see like how, like when we ask them, would a dedicated cycle lane actually help you? The response needs to be more of a nudging thing, saying that this will help you because of these reasons. And I think breaking that down really becomes important even in the first stage of just consultations, right? Will you use it or not if it's here? So I think that was sort of great to see. I will open it out to questions, at least a few questions, before I request Vidya to also share her remaining cycling presentation, which would be good to sort of understand and see two cycling projects in two different cities. Please, everybody,
on public demand, I think.
Yeah, on public demand, absolutely. This is because Dhawali has coaxed it, because he's part of the cycle-friendly Dodnakundi project. So his interest is, I want to get all the cycling projects out. So, but that's, no, Dhawal?
Yeah, I caught that slide before Vidya ended it, and I saw cycle, and I said, okay, we need to have that.
Well, if I had known, I would have presented that first.
We were in this is Malaysian topic. Coming back to the walking,
may I start with the question?
Okay, sure.
So to both the presenters, yeah, thanks. I think very very insightful. I was wondering if in any of these projects there was a factor where again, this is like a bit on the cycling side, but I think you had those cycling elements in your projects. So something like facility to carry the cycles on a bus, like some rack. I also heard that I think Kochi had allowed cycles to be taken on the metro. So just wondering if you can talk a bit about that aspect. Thanks.
Vidya, would you like to take this one? Yeah.
Yeah, sure, I can. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I didn't get your name. What was your name?
Dhaval, yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, in Kochi, actually, I mean, maybe it might have helped if my slides were already there, but can I just quickly run through that and then I will walk through, and then I will answer this. Is that fine?
Or in case someone wants to drop off, you can circle back to this question later. No issue.
Yeah, so we can come back. If anyone has any further questions, we can just ask that. Disha, if your question is also related to cycling, maybe we can see Vidya's and then circle back to that. But if anyone else in the audience has another question regarding this, please go ahead. There's a raise hand option, which you can raise, and I can ask you to sort of unmute in that order. Okay, looks like there aren't many questions. So, Vidya, go.
Hi, can I just quickly ask a question? Thanks, Vidya and Abhimanyu, for those really nice presentations. I just wanted, this is not directed to anybody in particular, but I was just wondering, how do you sort of assess impact on stakeholders prior to the design stage? How do you go about doing that?
So in both of our projects, we did surveys prior, like I mentioned the site context appraisal stage. We did extensive surveys one was of course to map the different user groups and then have targeted questions and interactions with those user groups to understand how they use the space. And of course, the design response was a direct reflection of what came out of those interactions. I think that's fairly easy to do, and what I mentioned was also a rapid assessment, right? Like, so you don't do like an extensive sort of survey, like it's done over a period of a week. You maybe target like say 100 stakeholders or so, and then of course we're also mapping simultaneously other things like pedestrian counts. This passive mapping is what that we're doing, right? There's one is an active engagement where we're directly going and asking questions, and then the second one is also the passive sort of our own observational mapping, sort of audits as you may call them, where we just do our own audit of the pedestrian environment and also the sort of vehicular counts and volumes of traffic flows, and to get a sense of what is it that we're working with. I don't see it very different from a design process for permanent intervention. It shouldn't be at all. You would have to do all of this even for a permanent design intervention. It's just that this whole thing is like a shrunk timeline, right? Like, so from conceptualization to the implementation, it's literally the entire permanent design intervention exercise shrunk. So you'll have to just sort of see how you time it. Like, let's say 3 months. It took us 3 months in Coimbatore, and likewise in Kochi as well. Like, we did, and Kochi of course was a little bit more moderated because it was part of the cycles for change, and so there was a requirement to do those handlebar surveys and conduct certain public engagement activities like cycle rallies and engage with existing cycling groups. So that was a more moderated engagement, and we did not per se direct that. What we did in our Kochi project was more of the technical assessment and providing design resolution for the on-ground situation, and go ahead and do the implementation. So there was a small difference in the role that we played in both. Whereas in Coimbatore, we did the entire gamut of exercises, like from the pre design stage assessment as well as the post assessment. The cycling one, of course, was more about the city taking ownership of the project. So there was a lot of responsibility that was vested in on them, and they needed to take charge of those activities. So while we helped, in small ways, we didn't per se, direct that engagement.
Understood. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
If I could just add to that, I think it is very right about the very short nature of these projects, and therefore like the need to do rapid research. And I think like there's always scope for to do it more intensively. What does help beyond interviews and on-ground observation is documentation. As I could just really share my screen real quick, like things like time lapses and this is a project that we were doing in Gurgaon, um, and just the nature of time lapse helps you just identify patterns of movement and such, and therefore documentation should also be like integrated into how we do research. So just addition.
Great. Thank you.
Can I ask Harsh? You raised your hand. Please unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. So, I would like to ask that can you put some light on the funding part of the projects both of you all shared, and how is the budget decided, and what is the process of the entire funding?
Sure.
So when I had walked through the stages, stage 3 was the design part, right? Like where you're taking the responses from stage 2, which was the site context appraisal, and then you're arriving at conceptual designs. And as I mentioned, very similar to what you would do for a actual permanent intervention. There is a detailing of the design, materials, bill of quantities, cost estimates. There's absolutely no difference in how you go about it, and again, funds. You can also like scale it down depending on how much funding you have, and scale it up depending on like again vice versa. So the good thing is, of course, like you can also, depending on the budget, you can also sort of like control. Sorry, depending on the budget, you can also sort of have different design responses. Like, and I think that also sort of lends to a creative challenge when you're working on practical projects. It's also possible to crowdsource. It's possible to raise donations, and the thing about being citizen-led initiatives is that you can also sort of save this possibility for crowdsourcing. We have not tried it yet. In both the projects that we worked on, there was funding that was. We had a set budget, but there was funding that was given to us to execute the projects in both cases. But yeah, as I mentioned, one of the key roles in a tactical urbanism project is fundraising. So you can either work backwards, or you can do your designs, get your estimates, and then raise funding, or you can work backwards. Like with the funding that you have, you can sort of see what kind of interventions you can put down on the ground as well.
Okay, got it, got it. Thank you so much. And one last thing, is there any fixed criteria for a limited budget? Because obviously these projects are stringent in their budget. So is there some bracket of the budget of the projects you showed, or is it that how much ever is required is being granted?
I'm sorry, I didn't get your question. Your audio is also a little broken.
And then is there a fixed bracket of budget, like suppose 30 to 50,000 rupees is accepted for such kind of projects which you shared, or
So we did a kind of a rough calculation, and if you want to look at just for a very basic intervention which involves extending sidewalk and putting cones and delineating it with cones and rope and some painting, like it works out to something like about 1.8 lakhs per kilometer. So if that kind of helps.
yeah, got it, got it. Thank you so much.
But I'm sure you can do it for much less than this one.
Yeah, I mean, like actually, it's a very interesting thing because over here for the Suma grant, they've given 50 lakhs per neighborhood to actually execute across multiple things. So this is set by the government, and they've said you have to work within this gamut, but of course you have to do a detailed costing to get things before getting things
Okay.
implemented. And one of the key components of that is because this is a 1 year project, and we are actually getting 3 to 6 months to just execute the pilot and activate it. So I think that is an interesting thing here, and it's quite a substantial amount of money also to look at testing and probably doing a few low cost interventions which may be slightly permanent as well.
Yeah, sure. So you can do 25 kilometers then.
We're going to use it as an opportunity to make BBMP spend further and say you improve what you've done wrong.
But you can demonstrate on 25 kilometers now.
Yeah, we can demonstrate, but we're not going for 25. We're going for a fairly, I think for the cycle lane, we're thinking of around a 9 kilometer stretch. And we've just gone out with voting. And for Malleswaram here, we're thinking of the conservancies, which is effectively 3 kilometers.
How much?
Plus
Sorry, how many?
Vidya, I think it's frozen. Yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
I didn't hear that. Your voice trailed off. I'm sorry. How many kilometers are you looking at?
So we're looking at 9 kilometers for the cycle lane. That is in Dodanakundi. And in Malleswaram, we are looking at 2 routes effectively that would be 3 kilometers of conservancy. And there is an entire stretch, if I have to add it up. And probably certain footpath stretches that are, adding on to that. So another 5 maybe at the most. So that's the stretch that we're looking at effectively. But of course, this is one of the interventions happening in Malleswaram and in Dodanakundi. There are a few other interventions around public transport and around walking and looking at hop on hop off buses and things like that. So it's sort of an integrated proposal.
Sure.
But yeah, that's what's been allocated.
Yeah. I mean, I was just kidding. You don't have to do 25. You can do 5 and demonstrate several other value additions. In this. I mean, there's so much potential, and I'm aware of the 3 projects that one of them is wayfinding, one of them is cycling, and one of them is walking. And I think there's a good potential to have all of them demonstrated very nicely with that budget.
Yeah. Dhawan, you have one question. Please go ahead and ask. I don't see anyone else who's raised hand.
Okay, so just kind of since the budget was being discussed, so in any of these pilot projects, given that it's like a limited area, those kind of things, but then given that that money has been spent, the project has been done, do you also then give an estimate to the government, or is there something factored in to say you expect so much ongoing spend to maintain it? It should not be like, oh, we did it, okay, it was there for some time, and it was a pilot, and then it just kind of goes sort of south slowly.
It's a good question. There's really no funding for O&M for this, and also the other thing is tactical urbanism projects are like sort of temporary in nature. Like they are meant to quickly collect feedback post implementation, and you have to move them into a permanent infrastructure sooner than later. Like before the paint is wearing off, you should have moved it to a permanent proposal. I think that's really what it's aiming at. But yeah, it's kind of interesting because I think we went back to Coimbatore a year later, and some of the paint markings were still there. So I think we were quite happy to see that. But as I said, I think it's meant to be temporary in nature, so there's no kind of O&M associated with it. It's kind of interesting because just this evening we had our ministry review for the Kochi Cycles for Change project, where there was a jury and we had to present, and I think there was the post-implementation assessment that was also that had to also be presented as part of that. So what happened was, and I think it was a very nice, honest reporting, is people ignored the temporary tracks. They just went ahead and parked on it, and then like other vehicles were driving on it. And but I think what it did was it just the presence of the temporary tracks, the pilot intervention that we did, it was a 5 kilometer stretch. The presence of the pilot intervention provoked a lot of citizen groups and cyclist groups to put pressure on the municipality and say, look, look at what's going on. Like there's infrastructure, but then you're not sort of maintaining it as it should be, and it's not delineated, and people are parking on it. And there was a lot of press on it as well, like with photographs showing vehicles parked on the cycle track. And as a result of it, there was out of all of that pressure, the mayor was forced to announce that 2021 would be the year of green mobility, and that they would take their cycling infrastructure seriously. And so they're right now going full steam ahead, implementing these projects into a permanent infrastructure, as well as having brought the traffic police on board to make sure that they take care of the delineation. Like the cones are all like they make sure that the traffic cones that were placed are respected, and nobody's violating and driving in the cycle lane or parking in the cycle lane. So to that extent, I think the tactical urbanism measure had an impact on had like a sort of a ripple effect on several other agencies, and is now leading to some change. So yeah, it was. I think it was an interesting twist in the story that we ourselves did not expect, that it would encourage more cooperation and change from the city agencies themselves to take this infrastructure seriously.
Abhimanyu, if you want to add something to that.
I would want to, thanks. I think very, like they said, very well asked. And actually, like we can say that temporarily, that's also my question. I think I also have a question for Vidya, in the sense of how long was the Coimbatore intervention meant to stay, because it becomes a very it becomes a cause of concern if maybe pedestrian is still maybe not so much in danger because of interventions, but a lot of times if paint starts to fade away, it gives a false sense of infrastructural presence, which is very dangerous, and therefore, like, I think tactical urbanism, in that sense, these projects do not stop at the pilot, do not stop at just documentation and just like showing as an effort that was done, because there is a simultaneous need to wrap it up. If it is meant for learning, then just wrapping it up, because like you must have seen in my presentation, we also, instead of traffic cones, sometimes NDMC pushed for permanent bollards to be installed, and while the paint withers away, those bollards are just then they're more permanent, and that would lead to a situation that is not too great for the cyclist or to the motorist. And I think this question therefore like touches upon an important thread about how do you convert tactical urbanism into permanent infrastructure, and like the agencies and the cohort that is doing this tactical urbanism, how, like, what is the responsibility on them to like take it further, because sometimes these contracts just end, and who takes up that responsibility is also like a very hanging question.
Yes.
So quick interjection there before, so same thing, along, I think if you took like 3 months or something to like sort of implement it, can you clarify how much was the subsequent, if I may say, focus period, right? Where everybody was committed to say, okay, next 3 months, this is definitely going to be active. And then it's like, okay, then sort of the project period has ended. And then maybe like, that was, beyond that was my question where, okay, then what happens, right? But how much was the active, study period after the intervention was done to say, now we are going to study the impact?
So when I said 3 months, I meant that was the study period. So the interaction with the agencies, the implementation was 5 days.
And after that was how much was the period where you said, okay, now it's logged and loaded. Next 3 months, everybody focuses on what is going on, and then then we sort of go our separate ways. Like, am I following correctly or?
Yeah. So in Coimbatore, also because we had several other, additions in terms of placemaking, like it had an expiry date. We had to uninstall actually. So it was after a period of 2 weeks. Because we put stuff there and we couldn't leave it, so we had to uninstall. The paint markings, of course, remained, and as I mentioned, some of them even are there today. But the other, sort of placemaking interventions like the shade structures, the planters, and so on, those we had to remove. We also
Just,
removed it,
oh, wow.
hoping that.
Sorry. So you are saying just 2 weeks?
Yeah, it was just 2 weeks.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, I'm saying this is the above ground installations.
Oh,
Those were
yeah.
removed in 2 weeks. Yeah, I mean, we don't remove the paint.
Right. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's what it's literally like a compression of the the design and execution process for a permanent project. So your implementation feedback also is collected over a period of 2 weeks immediately after, like right in the heat of the moment, and then you move it towards sort of permanence after that.
Okay. Coimbatore was also similar time frames. You like after installation or whatever, after implementation, just 2 weeks, and then you say, okay.
I'm talking about Coimbatore only. Yeah. I mean,
sorry. Then the Kochi one. Sorry.
Those tracks are still there. I mean, we only did the cycle tracks over there. So those were only the pop-up bicycle lanes. There was no additional above-ground infrastructure. So it was literally, we did like 5 kilometers, actually 10 because it's two ways. So it's just like 5 kilometers in one direction, 10 kilometers of cycle track that was installed, and it's still there.
Okay.
I mean, that's not going to go because.
Okay.
Dhawan, I'm going to connect you to Vidya directly.
Yeah, I think it looks like there's certainly something on my mind that
Absolutely, and I think we'll try to get them in even separately for a discussion, which we should do for Darnakundi. I would, keeping track on time, I will actually extend it to Vidya as well as Abhimanyu. We are doing a cycle-friendly Darnakundi project, which I would reach out to and try to arrange a session with the cyclists there, the team of cyclists that are working on cycle lanes, and I will reach out to you guys in I think due time as well once we hit design for cycling. And Suchitra, are you still around? I'm going to give the wrap up to Suchitra.
I have no choice.
Yeah. Yes. Suchitra Malleswaram Social. She anchors the community group there, also an architect. So I'm going to hand it over to Suchitra to close this session.
Okay, thank you so much. It's been great listening to you guys, and I think ending with tactical measures is kind of a way to also have a sense of like what can be done quickly, and it doesn't just like we're just hanging on to some long project which doesn't get done at all. Couple of things I suppose is that I would hope that we're looking at tactical interventions leading to more permanent change. That certainly is something that's a concern for all of us because there's a lot of money and forget about money, actually it's like not money, it's a lot of time that is and thought and effort which goes into doing tactical measures, and there's really no point if it just stays there. So I mean, good example I can think of is when Times Square was changed after Sadiq Khan's measures there, or when they tried to change this thing of induced congestion in Denmark. They just narrowed down the pathways of letting the drive. This was a bridge, and they just did this very quickly and studied it, and then it's just become a permanent measure. So we really should not be sitting at tactical measures. We should be moving on to the next thing. But also, Vidya, it's great to see that these things are taking off with the complete, with the active participation of the government, because otherwise it just doesn't work at all. they have to be in, have a buy-in completely. But also, what Abhimanyu, what you are doing, it's in Delhi, I would say it's not just a government, but also a cultural change which has to come, because I grew up in Delhi, and I know that the Delhi mentality. I was cycling when I was when I was studying, working, and so on. And God, it's difficult to cycle there. So it's not just, it's a mindset which has to change all through the country, I suppose. It's not just
absolutely. Yeah.
So there's a huge amount of work. It's not just trying to induce change. Tactical work is not just physical infrastructure and all of those, but also and of course that the demonstration does help it, but also I think a lot of continuing work has to go into how to make sure there's a permanent like brain change, which also happens, I suppose. And I again, one more thing which I remembered was when I was speaking to Rahul Mehrotra a couple of years back. He has this thing called kinetic architecture, where he's talking about how in India we have these big pandals and things like we do for our festivals. Those are really tactical measures in some sense, because you just sort of just come there, do something, and the whole place changes, and then a few days later it's all gone. Varanasi, I mean, we have any number of examples actually, which we are very good at jugadu solutions, I suppose, and that's probably why it can work. But again, jugad has to, I suppose, turn into permanent solutions, hopefully somewhere or the other. So wonderful to look at your projects and gives us a lot of, I think, hope that things will sort of change over time. And I liked very much what Vidya was saying, that the S word and now is the P word, and I don't know what is the next word we're looking for, alphabet that we're looking for. Sophia, you and I should sort of think about this.
Introducing new words.
New word.
Maybe the C word, get the community in.
Yeah,
anchoring everything.
That's true, the C word. The P word can also be the people word, whatever. Anyway, great to wrap this up on this, on a sort of a high note of two lovely sets of projects. And I think if you are able to sort of also jump in and help us and kind of stay with us on what we are doing, it'll be really nice, because we have a cohort of designers who are going to be looking at this over the next 2 weekends. And then as Sobhya mentioned, that we have a fairly long engagement. So there's a lot that can actually, I suppose, happen in during that period. So thank you very much. And I'll hand this over to Sobhya now.
Thank you, guys. Great wrap up to a superb set of sessions. The recordings are available online on our website. They will be up soon, and I think that will help a lot of people. I'm sure a lot of people around that are also engaging with this Cycles for Change challenge, Streets for People challenge, going forward as well. Thank you so much again, Vidya and Abhimanyu, and I will reach out to you again for cycling.
Thank you for having us.
Have a nice evening. Bye.